Hi, everyone. This is Andre Champagne here at Carbon 60, and I'm here with Matthew Trushinski. He's a senior director of product marketing at Arctic Wolf, and he specializes in managed detection and response. Thank you very much for joining us today, Matt.
Awesome. Thank you to be here. Appreciate
Matt
the time.
also, yeah, Matt also, by the way, has a diverse technology background. For those that are just joining us, he obviously does everything from security to IoT to AI, as well as, of course, carrier networks. And of course, obviously, I've got to know Matt for quite a while here, and he's really passionate ultimately about applications of new technology that ultimately solve persistent problems and applying them to basically solve those problems within corporations. That being said, Matt, again, thanks for joining us. And I wanted to ask you a couple of quick questions, specifically around the cyber attacks that are ultimately happening here in Canada. There's a huge exponential growth. In fact, actually highlighting this exponential growth increase in cyber attacks in Canada. IDC has recently released that 4 and 5 Canadian organizations have reported detecting ransomware here in Canada. In fact, two and five were just not aware of the breaches that ultimately occurred. This is staggeringly a huge number. It's incredible, in fact. And that being said, also recently in a National Post article that was published on March 28th titled Canada, the target of thousands of cyber attacks every day, CSIS also revealed that, and it's cited in a federal report listing state-sponsored cyber attacks from, Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, and the greatest strategic threat to Canada, where Canada's critical infrastructure was ultimately hit. And more than half of 235 known ransomware attacks were against Canadians in 2021. So, like I said, it's staggeringly, like it's incredible. Um, that being said, we here at Carbon 60, we've been monitoring, detecting a lot of these exponential increases in cyber attacks. And of course, we've been using essentially Arctic Wolf to do that. Um, a couple quick questions. What has Arctic Wolf experienced when it comes to ransomware in terms of the sophistication of some of those attacks?
Yeah, thanks, Andre. I think, well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's awesome to be here. Uh, as a Canadian myself, someone who works with a lot of Canadian companies, people that my friends and colleagues and family that work for Canadian businesses, the trend of attack on Canadian businesses is extremely alarming and both something it's hard not to take personally, right? It's when your friends and family feel like they're under attack from these sophisticated actors. And I think what we see is certainly the same increase in cyber attacks on Canadian businesses. But the good news, whether it's good news or at least hopeful news, is that the sources of these kind of attacks are remaining pretty consistent. So you're looking at typical sources of these breaches occurring, whether that be misuse or stolen credentials, a lot of phishing still leading their way into ransomware. And
Mhm.
then, more and more we're seeing the exploitation of vulnerabilities, whether that be something like the 0 days for the exchange service this past year in Hafnium, kind of leading the way and leading the charge where, you're getting like a 2 week delay before these kind of major vulnerabilities are being weaponized by either, ransomware groups or state actors. Um, so although, the trend is definitely up and to the right in terms of volume of attack, the tactics are remaining similar in terms of what we see, which does present the opportunity to go and shore up against some of those aspects of how these people are getting into Canadian businesses.
Yeah, and it's like that triple threat essentially that's occurring right now. I mean, we've got like these sort of combination of threats that are ultimately hitting us. And it's not just one single tool that might be used essentially to get through the perimeter of a company's organization, i.e. their infrastructure, but ultimately a combination of those different tools that allow them to gain access. But to, of course, not only wipe data, but at the same time, from what we've seen, stopping all the services ultimately that they may have, whether that be e-commerce, file transfer, or even, cron jobs that they might be actually, executing on the back end. In essence, what's happening is these hackers are essentially getting through, installing their ransomware, and at the same time encrypting everything or just wiping it all clean. Um, Yeah.
Yeah, and you even have, I mean, there's just pure extortion now too, right? Where people are just encrypting files and holding them,
Mhm.
and threatening to just plain release them, or even not encrypting at all and just sealing files and threatening to release them online for a sum of money. Um, there's a lot of consistent tactic there. I think to be able to respond to and to be able to combat something like this, I think speed is probably the most critical aspect, right? And what is even
Yeah.
more critical than that, going upstream a bit, is to think about how we monitor kind of all aspects of our attack surfaces, right? Mentioned all different ways that they can get in and exploit, and it really goes to show that these actors are using different tools and different systems, you know and as they're doing that, they're kind of leaving footprints everywhere, right,
Mm.
and indicators of compromise. And a lot of the ransom attacks we see start with something like, suspicious country login, followed by maybe, access to Active Directory, into, dropping a file onto a server, executing maybe PowerShell umpire on that server, kicking up command and control traffic on the network. Like, those are all breadcrumbs. And if you can have a really fast time to detection and response, where the moment those activities are happening inside your systems, red flags are going off, and you've got people looking into it, triaging, and ultimately helping you to recover and remediate from those tactics. That's the kind of speed it takes to combat something like ransomware, right? By the
Yeah.
time you triage an alert 2 days later from your SIM, it might be too late, right? You're probably already extorted or encrypted, or whatever at that point. So what we find with our customers is really that speed is super critical in combating ransomware.
Yeah, and we've also noticed, even in Canada, we've had some school boards that, even some businesses that were taken down for up to even 22 days. Um, and obviously, even a study that we just recently saw as well from Coveware, they said that the average business downtime due to ransomware, a ransomware attack in essence, is 21 days. Whereas with Arctic Wolf, we can ultimately remediate something within, like, what, 3 minutes, right?
Yeah, yeah. So 3 minutes is about time to detect and respond to a lot of these really critical threats, and that's truly the speed you need. Like I said, once you're getting to people being inside your environment for longer than that, odds are they're moving on to your most critical assets. They're deploying something like ransomware, or even something like, the level of sophistication needed for these actors is often decreasing as we get into things like ransomware as a service, right? Where you can go and you can not even have to develop these tools on your own, but you can buy them online, or give a cut to the person you're getting the tools from. It becomes really easy to deploy these things. So the sophistication required to deploy something like ransomware is actually decreasing, which
Right.
means that that's why ransomware is on the rise. I mean, there's such the bar for it is lowering,
And it's
right?
just it's weird because some of these companies, they essentially have a SIM, where the SIM in of itself may have not detected it, or maybe it detected it, but the problem is that they didn't know what to do. There was an incident response strategy. Ultimately, we look at companies that are looking at or thinking of buying a SIM, or even developing their own cyber operations team, versus what Carbon 60's managed detection and response does, which is powered by Arctic Wolf. I mean, why would anybody want to buy a SIM?
Yeah, a lot of people, I genuinely think they haven't been exposed to another way to do things, right? So a lot of people think, well, I have to deploy a SIM. That's the first step in becoming safe, right? That's like what I have to do, right? Then I gotta hire
Right.
people, and I gotta fuel it, I gotta tune it, and I think the stat at a Gartner this past year was 1 in every 3 companies who will attempt to deploy a SIM and their own security operations will fail to do so,
Right.
right? So right out of the gate, you've got 1/3 of Canadian companies that are just not going to be able to get their SIM and security operations off the ground. The other
Mhm.
2/3, you wonder how expensive it's going to be, how time consuming. What's your budget? How much time are you going to spend looking for what I call the needle in the needle stack, right? Which is you just looking through alerts all day long, trying to find the one that's legitimate and truly indicative of something like an indicator of compromise. And then you could be looking at a single alert. Then how are you going to correlate that against other sources of telemetry that might be really critical for that alert, right? Um, So that's where, kind of the more that we talk to people who are either they've tried to deploy a SIM and it hasn't gone well or hasn't met their expectations, or they've, they're looking for alternatives to kind of building and managing that on their own. Maybe they're looking for ways to augment their security team or give their security team more opportunity and time to be proactive in solving security challenges. I think that's where a lot of people will go with something like Carbon 60 and a managed detection response solution. And you don't have to look far to see the ROI on that. We've had some studies come out and show that deploying a solution like ours is 400% plus ROI versus doing it yourself, right? So
it's an incredible difference. I mean, the contrast is it's a no-brainer. Number one, it's a lot more affordable to have an organization, more importantly, respond within 3 minutes than 21 days, right?
Yeah.
Some organizations don't even know that they've been attacked. They have the SIM, but maybe perhaps the SIM missed something, or even perhaps they took it as a false positive, or they didn't know how to read the SIM. And it's also the other side as well. We've even seen some organizations where they've had staff, but the staff wasn't continuously trained on, of course, obviously the changes that had come from the developer who had developed the SIM, right?
Yeah.
So it even makes it's just so much more. I mean, in terms of the people resources, 10 to 12 people, 20 days down the line where you actually detect something, whereas we both can do it within 3 minutes. And of course, the contrast is just, it's staggeringly there. There's no doubt about it.
I think go ahead.
I was actually going to say that, one of the things that I saw in terms of eliminating some of these cyber risks, and making it ultimately a priority, and a lot of these organizations see obviously eliminating cyber risk as a priority, and that's ultimately what we do. But to ultimately drastically reduce the cost of these data breaches, basically it will eliminate your downtime. It will ensure business continuity. It will ensure, obviously, the partnerships that you currently have as well, and the trust that your customers ultimately have. But what are some of the key security concerns that Arctic Wolf has learned from engaging with some of the C6C customers that we have? Carbon 60, we've been very, I guess, instrumental with, of course, Arctic Wolf, and of course working together with our customers. But again, what have you learned in terms of engaging with some of our customers?
Yeah, I think there's two major concerns, right? And we would classify them as, one, how likely am I to be breached, right? That's like the major concern. And then the second concern is, if I was to be breached, what is the scope and impact and the time to recovery should that happen, right? Those are the kind of two key fundamental questions we help our customers ask. And if we're working with them in this kind of like maturity model of helping them not to just detect and respond to threats, but instead become better over time, that's how we ultimately end up reducing their cyber risk, right? So how do we both limit the blast radius should something happen, have really good policies around detection and response time, have everything kind of set up with that customer beforehand, so that way we know who to call and how to triage and what are their most important assets and what is the criticality of an alert look like for that particular customer. That's all kind of right a boom, right? And then a lot of what we want to be focusing with Carbon 60 customers on is left a boom, right? What can we do to harden those environments? What can we do to be proactive? What can we do to manage vulnerabilities and patch things before they have a chance to be exploited? What about how fast we can respond to 0 days as a team and get them fixed and patched and recovered? What can we do in terms of training our people about how to use passwords and how not to get phished and how to become a hardened security kind of culture organization? That's all left of boom, and that can actually do a lot to prevent the idea of being breached whatsoever. So, we really think about it, and we work with a lot of our customers on those two aspects. Obviously, being really, really good at being, providing the detection, response, and recovery, remediation, and getting people back to business and lessening the effect of an attack. But then again, it's kind of an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? What can we do to go upstream with these customers and really work with them on those posture improvements that are going to make them feel really secure, right? They want to feel like they've got the warm blanket that lets them sleep at night, knowing that they're protected, by Arctic Wolf and by Carbon 60.
Yeah, absolutely. And these existing malware toolkits that are out there, I mean, one of them just recently released was Pipedream. And Pipedream has been hitting essentially a lot of critical infrastructure, specifically targeting the manufacturing industries in terms of manufacturing equipment. Basically, what it's been doing is, from what we've seen, is that it's been hitting the sort of logic controllers. Those are the logic controller boards that are actually connected to the network within, of course, these manufacturing companies. And ultimately, they've been getting through not only through the actual endpoints, i.e., the computers that, of course, the employees particularly use, but actually through the actual manufacturing equipment in of itself, right? That is connected to the network. That being said, some of these challenges that the organizations have expressed in terms of meeting these, sort of deadlines around compliance and NIST and CMMC and even PCI or even HIPAA for that matter. What have you been seeing in terms of course, obviously, again, satisfying these security assessments and as well as, well, the compliance audits?
Yeah, so I think this is where kind of one of our approaches that we call our kind of concierge service comes in to really help. So every Arctic Wolf customer, or the kind of Arctic Wolf backend itself kind of has this aspect of this kind of relationship building, right? Where you'll be working with a consistent person from Arctic Wolf and Carbon 60 on the kind of progression of your security posture and what you're working on. And that allows us to understand your environment, your compliance needs, your reporting needs, and really helps us to kind of understand the DNA of you as a business and what those kind of requirements look like for you to show your progress or compliance, or even things like be able to be insurable. So that approach where we kind of learn your business and work with you on it allows for us to really assist with things like compliance, both to show you how our service maps onto those compliances, to really help you understand where we can help, and where when you're filling out either reporting or surveys or whatever it takes to kind of either renew insurance policies or prove compliance, your Arctic Wolf and Carbon 60 team could be there to assist, right?
Right.
And a lot of what I hear from customers is the amount of time it takes to do the reporting and get it all together just to show it is a huge resource constraint on their team, right?
Yeah.
And so every moment where they're showing they're compliant is a moment where maybe they're not triaging an alert or doing an investigation or doing something proactive to protect their business. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to work with those customers to offload a lot of that kind of heavy burden it puts on teams, just on the administration of being compliant, is something that we can certainly help with.
Yeah, no, there's also that need to have that third party sort of compliance, right? Oversight at the end of the day as well. And you also alluded to the fact that, again, people, process, technology, you know, uh, all of these sort of are gaps within an organization, especially when you don't have people power, especially in this challenging workforce environment that we have right now, where it's even difficult just to get the resources that are trained with the IT technology that is constantly evolving, and to keep them
Yeah.
also trained with that technology as well, as that technology ultimately evolves. And of course, new enhancements come into play. They themselves also need to get trained on that. And now, how do you do that with a staff of 10 to 20 people that you need to essentially, again, manage these SIMs? More importantly, have that incident response management in place, right, as well. So, I see the challenge in a lot of these organizations right now, where they need that sort of automation, right? More importantly, they need that time to actually remediate something, which is ultimately a 3-minute window, which is
Yeah.
really, that's all you have before someone is already busted down that door and actually already gotten into your network at the end of the day. Yeah, no, I see a lot of these challenges as well. And have you obviously seen a lot of these? Because I know that the stats recently we're looking at, again, 33% of folders are saying, are not protected in any way, on a lot of, infrastructure and networks that are out there. I'm just looking at some of the stats as well. 28% of data breaches involve malware. And there's obviously, um, the ransomware attacks cause an average 21 days of downtime, where we can remediate things within just 3 minutes. I mean, it's incredible. So again, these data breaches and the ransomware, the phishing, the insider threats that are ultimately happening, this is where, like you said, Arctic Wolf as well as Carbon 60 have teamed up to essentially help organizations overcome these overwhelming challenges.
Yeah, it's what we're here to do, right? We're here to make kind of security easy, and we're here to kind of unify all the tools and all the disparate approaches that have been kind of, not presenting the results that we want to see, right? We keep on spending more money on cybersecurity. We keep on buying more cybersecurity tools, but the numbers of breaches just keep going up. And we fundamentally believe, because there's no one out there helping teams like actually operationalize security, right? Actually work with them on improving their posture, getting better over time, and then quickly responding to threats and shutting them down before they occur by lending our deep security expertise to these organizations. So it's a security for all approach, right? That we
Absolutely.
really want to get to. Yeah.
And on that note, Matt, I just wanted to say, honestly, thank you very much for joining us today. Everybody, again, this is Matthew Trushinski. He's a senior director of product marketing at Arctic Wolf, and he specializes in managed detection and response. If you have any questions whatsoever, please contact Carbon 60 and or Arctic Wolf. We're always here to always answer any of your questions, and we look forward to seeing you on, of course, obviously, perhaps our next meetup. All right. Again, Matt, it
Thank
was a
you.
pleasure meeting with you. We'll talk to you
Thank
soon.
you for having me. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye now.